Hello, everybody. Scott Fischer back with you again for another episode of Don't Let Haboob Hit You in the Face. And for those of you that are in Phoenix, Arizona, or in the greater Southwest deserts, you probably know what I'm talking about. If you look over my shoulder, there is what haboob is. In this case, that's a storm cloud, dust cloud that hit Phoenix this last summer, 65 miles wide, a mile high. That's Arizona State University over my shoulder getting swallowed by that cloud. Earlier in that day, we had no idea that storm was coming. And by the afternoon, when people are trying to drive home from work, the city is under siege from this massive dust cloud. And behind it came torrential rain and big winds. Trees were ripped down. My brother's apartment complex got crushed. And it is a metaphor, you guys. It's what I've used for years as a metaphor for what is going on in the lives of our aging loved ones. So often they've got healthcare issues, management issues, cognitive decline, various things that are happening in their lives that either they're ignoring, they're being too private about, our adult kids are trying to get involved. We don't pay attention. And by ignoring the often noticeable signs of aging, people unfortunately have dust storm or haboob hit their lives. And I have walked into so many families over the last 23 years. We've been helping thousands of families over the last 23 years navigate the complexities of aging, and often it's been after the haboob hits. My message today is call me before the crisis. We want to help you with tools and arm you and equip you to avoid what too often happens to some families. And so the show brings you some of the most thoughtful and I think tenderhearted and understand people that understand the complexities of these various issues, and professionals that work with these folks all the time. Today I've got Anjali Patel with me. Anjali's an attorney at the Tyler Allen Law Firm. She's a partner there, been practicing 15 years. I don't believe it. You don't look a day over 25, but so glad you're here. And you and I were talking about things that you like to hang your hat on. And I've said this for years. And when you said it, it just totally resonated. I always want to leave people better than the way I found them. And for an attorney to say that, I imagine there's a lot of people come into your practice or come into your office and they're in the middle of it, right? And so if you have that message, that motto, and that dedication to people and listening well, I imagine people feel like they've found a rescue or a lifeline when they come to you. So thanks for being here today. Sorry I rambled on there a bit, but it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for the warm welcome. And absolutely, I think you can't keep doing what you do for a living unless you find purpose in it, right? And my purpose is that I'm doing something meaningful, and that at the end of the day, that clients are happy they met me, and they're better off having met me than without
Yeah,
me.
most people don't think, oh man, I'm going to the attorney today. How cool
Yeah.
is that? Right? They probably it is not often the top priority of everybody to see their attorney. Or like I said, they're trying to dodge it. Have you done some work with small business as well? I know we're going to talk about your real focus of practice now, but you've been a business attorney in various avenues of law. You want to talk about that a minute, and then maybe talk a little bit more about your really interest in your focus area right now?
Yeah. I love my small business clients. If I could go to lunch like every day with one of them and just hear about like their growth and what they plan to do and be like a backboard for that, that would make me so happy. And so those clients are near and dear to my heart. And a lot of these things, like sometimes they go together, you know. So, we'll start with forming their LLCs if they need that. And then we'll start with their initial contracts. And then as they get bigger and they hire employees, then they have like employment type issues that they'll come back to me for. So I love that like long-term relationship with the clients where they come back as they need me.
Do you do any help with those small business owners or small clients that clients that have maybe collections issues or challenges with contracts with some of their vendors, and how to get some of I don't know, say conflicts resolved?
Yeah, sometimes what I really like to do is be proactive and avoid these big expensive litigations, because honestly, when it comes down to like a collections issue or something like that, sometimes you're going to spend more than you're fighting over, you know? And so if we
Yeah, for
can
sure.
reach resolutions, if we can make certain documents better from the start, we can avoid some of those issues and those
Yeah.
things.
So have you been at the Allen Law Firm all this time, or where's your journey been? How's it gotten to where you're at?
That's a good question. So I've been with the Tyler Allen Law Firm for the last 4 years, but before that, this firm was one of my first jobs when I first got out of law school. So a couple years in, I was Tyler's first associate back in the day, and I was traveling all around the state of Arizona helping clients and fighting in court over like traffic and criminal violations. And so
Okay.
the relationship started back then, and it's just grown, and I'm really thankful to be there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I want to get into a little bit about folks that are either there's kind of two groups, right? There's the seniors themselves that, and I would say those are the folks that are over 65, 70 years old that maybe are still living independently, of course, doing their own thing, having maybe starting to experience some of the challenges that are associated with aging. The reality is this: we're aging. Things are not the same. We don't problem solve. We don't have the same energy level. I mean, there's physical stuff. There's you start to see people downsizing, right? They've given up their 3 or 4,000 square foot home, and now maybe they're moving into over 55 accommodations, condos, smaller residences. Shoot, Stacy and I downsized from 3,500 to 1,500 a couple of years ago, and I'm just in my early 60s, right? We didn't want the big house anymore. So there's that group of people, and then there's the group of people that are me that have adult parents, and so I unfortunately just lost my mom after a long run. Mom passed a couple months ago, and my in-laws are in transition as we speak, and so I guess talk to both of those categories with, keep those kind of categories in mind. So as folks are coming in your office, what kind of stories are you hearing as they are transitioning? And because you have a big focus in homeowner association law and things that go well and not go well in that regard, right?
That's right. So a lot of times by the time clients find me, the problems that we'd love to talk about today have already occurred, So I think that there's some proactive work that we can talk through, and then there's what to do once that crisis has hit. But some of the stories I hear often are that my HOA's foreclosing on my property. I got served with a complaint, which is like the formal beginning of a litigation process. So they've been sued by their HOA, and they didn't do something they were supposed to do. And a lot of times what's unfortunate is they didn't even know they were supposed to do it.
Right.
And so that's where this problem started, is they had no idea it had gotten this bad until they're handed that lawsuit.
And the lawsuit is from the HOA towards the resident or the homeowner in that
Yeah.
regard.
Yeah.
Wow. 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 Um, and so I'm thinking about the people that might be hearing what you're saying. So if you're in my age group or the generation just north, and we're moving into a community, an over 55 community, gated community, has an HOA or an older neighborhood with an HOA, what do you want people to know that they should be aware of as that you're going into that situation?
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so let's back up a little bit. An HOA is a homeowners association. There's two different kinds in Arizona. There's planned communities, which is usually there's single family homes. They're separated. They don't share walls or
Mhm.
roofs, and they live on their own like lots, right?
Right.
Or there's condos, which are usually some more shared structures. So sometimes shared walls between the units,
Right.
shared roofs, things like that. If you're living in a gated community, usually the 55 plus ones, um, anything with like shared resources like a pool, community center, all of those are generally HOAs. So there's a contract between all of the homeowners to share in the costs of certain things. And I would say probably about half of the communities in Arizona, at least, are HOAs. So a lot of homeowners in Arizona are living in an HOA. And what you need to know from the start is you need to know what that contract says. So you get it during the closing process. along with a bunch of other documents, a big stack. Sometimes it's delivered all to you digitally, and people say, okay, I'll sign wherever, and then they move on.
Right.
And they never read it.
Right. Exactly.
So I'm going to say start by reading it. There's usually two key documents that you need to read. One is the CC&Rs, which is a recorded document. So it runs with the land. As when you purchase a home in an HOA, you are automatically saying yes to all those terms. And then a lot of HOAs have a separate rules document that has some extra rules in it. And so those rules can range from like what you're allowed to put in your backyard to what you're allowed to decorate with in the front and when you can decorate and what you're allowed to plant and change and things like that. And so read both documents, and the CC&Rs are dense. They have language that looks like it was written in the 80s or the 60s or something like that. And it can be hard to read those documents because
Right.
they're also like, scanned documents that were never easy to read. And so you got to force your way through that a little bit, or, book a consult or something so that we can go through them. So you know what you're agreeing to before there's issues come up. That's where I'd start.
Yeah, yeah. And there's usually some sort of, you mentioned about the changes that you want to do to your front yard. If you have a public facing backyard that's part of the overall planned community, you've got to, if you're going to plant a tree or take a tree down or paint the house or whatever, all that's usually got to go through that architecture committee and for some version of approval by the HOA. Why do people choose communities with HOAs? Because most of us get all frustrated with the HOAs that we live in, and I live in one. So, like, why do we do this?
I mean, I think that people are drawn to like the amenities, the community pool, the park, the whatever, the clubhouse.
Yeah.
I think for 55 plus, there's a whole bunch of things that come with that community, right?
Yeah.
In terms of programming and stuff that people want to be a part of, or it's next to a golf course and there's some sort of reciprocal agreement or something where you get access.
You were getting plus.
Anything newer than I would say like the 90s is built in the 90s is probably going to be in an HOA. So in terms of options, if you want to live in some of these cities that were built out later, if you want, closets and things, then people are drawn to that style, I think. And so they want to live there.
Yeah. 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 I guess it does leave you with no choice. My daughter moved into a house over in Ahwatukee that doesn't have an HOA, and I've lived in one for years, so it doesn't, but you drive into their neighborhood and there's a lot of variation in what you see around the neighborhood. Whereas you drive into my neighborhood and it's all pretty vanilla, cut and dry. Everybody looks pretty similar.
Another thing that people are drawn to for the senior community is like the idea of maintenance being covered by somebody else, right? I'm sure you see this theme come up all the time. I'll move into a condo and all I'll have to take care of is the interior. If they've been taking care of their outside for a long time, I think that that's got a big draw, right? No weeds, no like wall patching, no exterior problems, period. Which I think is a bit of a myth, but that's what they're drawn to.
Well, we were drawn to the smaller community. This is gated. We were also drawn to a smaller, kind of a lock and leave. Now we're empty nesters. The kids moved out. So Stacy was like, if you don't want them to move back in, let's get out of the house. Let's get out of the big house. So we've got one guest bedroom. They can only come one at a time to visit because we have 6 kids between us. So now we can it's a lock and leave, right? I don't have big trees. I don't have big grass. I don't have big maintenance outside. I'm not managing my own pool anymore. We've got a community pool. So for all those reasons, I'm just a little younger maybe than most that are doing the downsizing, but for seniors who are making some of those downsizing, there's also usually some concurrent, like I said, functionality issues, healthcare issues, maybe some cognitive processing issues that are, happening alongside. If another attorney has some of these clients that are in transition that might be either talking to either one of these two groups, any suggestions that you would tell an attorney, please include this in your assessment or please bring these things up so that they can help their clients avoid a problem later?
If you know your client is moving into an HOA for the first time, I'm going to say start with the documents, so that the homeowner understands what they're agreeing to, what their obligations are, what the HOA's obligations are. If your client's moving into a condo, insurance is a big piece of this puzzle. if they're still in the buying process, there's some key questions that your homeowners should be asking where they could need help understanding this whole picture. One of them is the reserves and how the budget works and the insurance deductible. So what's going on a lot in communities now in Arizona is that they're aging just like our clients, right? Um, and so there have been years of insurance claims that are creating a rise in the insurance deductible for the HOA.
Or
And
the
so
HOA.
and so the homeowner needs to understand what their obligation is if, let's say, there's a leak, right? And if there's a leak from the unit above them, for instance, what's the process for how that goes and who's paying for it? Because a lot of homeowners are surprised to find out that, let's say, their condo deductible is $25,000, and that has to be paid out of pocket by the person making the claim, whether it was their fault or not in a lot of situations.
Whoa.
That's what I'm saying. And so people think when they're buying in a condo that they're trading off like all of this extra liability and stuff like that, and they're paying the HOA to deal with it. But the two work together, and these costs are rising. And if you've buying into a community with a lot of deferred maintenance, there can be some other issues that come up. So for instance, somebody asked for a consult a couple months ago where their HOA actually had aluminum wiring, which was a fire hazard. And the HOA had not been dealing with this problem for a long time. Now they were going to issue a special assessment to every single person in that unit that was going to be over $1,000. It had to be paid that year, and they had to rewire the entire community. And in the meantime, they were going to lose their insurance coverage. That's a huge liability problem. And
Yeah.
if there's an issue before that wiring's done and the coverage is back in place, I mean, that's not what the homeowner realized they were signing up for, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
financially, what kind of an emergency fund do I need? What am I going to be responsible for? And what is the situation in terms of ongoing maintenance and deferred maintenance and costs that are coming down the pike? That's what I would love if homeowners had attorney help on during the
Yeah.
buying
Yeah.
process.
Wow. 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 So literally, as somebody's making this move and they're moving into a place, we're saying, call Anjali. Come, let me see the CCNRs. Let me see whatever you're signing or potentially signing, so that I can. What is the requirement of a community, an HOA, to disclose what maintenance or what issues that may be under their authority or under their responsibility? Do they have to disclose anything? Because I don't remember getting anything from them when I was buying the house I'm in,
Yeah,
but I would have
it's
known to
coming
ask
in that
either.
packet to a certain extent, and then you need to follow up and ask some more questions during that process, which is such a short process, right? Like the escrow
Right.
process.
Right.
Or, I mean, I think a realtor could help too if they've got some understanding of that. There's some public records that members are entitled to once they've bought into the property.
Yeah.
So, and then there's some questions that the lender is asking if it's a finance property. And so getting a copy of those and looking at those would be very helpful to prospective
Gotcha.
homeowners.
Gotcha. If I said I wish more people would, is that the answer? I wish more people would get you involved on the time that a purchase or acquisition of a property is going to be happening, or
Yeah,
maybe you've
or
got a different answer. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Asking those questions, either using me or someone like me to help them through that process, because they don't even
Yeah.
know what they're getting into. They would have never even guessed these things, right? Or looking at, I'm really working on more resources online, like videos and things like that, where they can review them. But they're just thrown out so much information that they have to process that I think it could be hard. So like a quick 30-minute consultation can help them just know what questions to ask and what they're getting into, so they can make it like an informed choice.
Man, that'd be a well spent couple of bucks to make sure you got a clear. Because my follow up question, then the obvious thing is, well, where have you seen it? Where have you seen the mess? When you said people show up into your office and there's a mess, where have you seen the mess, or what's a mess look like? So maybe this will come to life for people.
There's some big things that come up all the time. So one of them is they've built something on their property that they now have to tear down. The HOA is saying, hey, you got to tear it down because you didn't get permission. A lot of people don't realize that if they have something like they buy a shed from Costco, right, and they install it, that can be a problem they have to tear down, let alone they paid for like an expensive, beautiful gazebo, pergola situation, and now it's too tall and they have to tear it down. So those situations, I can come in, draft a letter, try to help them work with their HOA, and hopefully get to a resolution that does not involve tearing down the thing that they bought, spent a lot of money on. Another situation that comes up all the time is people don't realize that if they don't pay their assessments, so that's the regular payment they have to make, either monthly, quarterly, yearly. If they don't pay that after a certain period of time or amount, the HOA can turn around and file a lawsuit to sue and foreclose on the property. So, what that means in real life is you've been paying your mortgage for 20 years. You stop paying your assessment for some reason. The HOA can come in and foreclose on your property, regardless of the equity that you have from paying for the last 2 decades. And if you don't act in a way that usually involves paying a lot of money, you're going to lose that property.
Okay, they could. That seems incredible.
Yeah.
That's what the worst case scenario, and you've seen it happen.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Hopefully they're reaching out to me when they get served with the paperwork at the very least, right? Or even better,
Okay.
when they get the collection letter before the lawsuit is filed, because then it's a lot
Yeah,
easier to resolve.
yeah,
But
yeah.
every now and then I get one where there's already been a default judgment. They missed the time period to respond. And now, or I had one consult where they didn't know until after the sheriff's sale. And at that point, there was nothing I could do.
So then they put it to a sheriff's sale if they foreclose and
the
it gets
sheriff's
all the way.
sale the sheriff's sale had already happened. So they were getting evicted from their house at that point.
Now they're getting evicted from the house they don't own anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, that they paid for. Oh.
Yep.
Well, that's a haboob for you. Oh my
That's
Lord.
a haboob for you.
That's haboob. All right, look, y'all, we don't want this to happen to you. That's a big one. And so look, if you're an adult child or you're a professional and you're hearing this and you've got loved one or clients that are having trouble making their bills, they're disorganized, they've downsized, but they've lived in the same neighborhood for 100 years and they've got an HOA, man, be checking on your mom and dad to make sure they're paying their assessments and that they're not getting correspondence from the HOA that they're not paying attention to. I'd want to see that. If you need help getting somebody to pay mom's bills or whatever, if it's not you, or maybe you don't live in town, because we have a lot of that in Phoenix. I think only about a third of us live statistically. Our parents and our generation are together. Either they're out of town and we're here, or more likely they're here and the kids are out of town. So if you're listening to us, man, please, please, please make sure that somebody with some oversight to their bills because I had no idea the scope of this problem.
Yeah, there's some really expensive problems out there. One thing that a adult child could do if they're helping with this situation is a lot of HOAs have a portal, which is like online.
Yep.
And so the owner could list this adult person as like a proxy or somebody that's allowed to access the portal on their behalf. Okay. And then they could log in and keep an eye on it, maybe like 4 times a year. You could see, for some reason, like banking information changed, payments have changed, management changed. We need to set up auto pay again. The assessment's raised, and so you're paying this amount, but you need to pay this amount. Or, hey, you got a bunch of fines on your account for this thing. Let's go ahead and resolve it before.
Yeah. I guess I was thinking that there must be, and maybe, as we kind of wrap this up, tell me about when they've done it right or their success. And the obvious is like, hey, there's not a lawsuit. But there's got to be some interventions that you can go, that really helped this family, or, hey, this was the crisis. This is how we got out of it. I'm sure you've got stories about how you helped come to the rescue.
Yeah, ideally. So when something was built that it wasn't supposed to, if we can get a variance or approval after the fact, great, move on. You're good to go. You don't need me
Yeah.
anymore. I love those situations. The situations with the foreclosures, if it's not too late until like the sheriff's sale has like passed and you're getting evicted. And so any
Yeah.
step before that, I can help with negotiating and getting things back where they need to be.
Mhm.
and, and then the last situation too is like the in the event of like property damage, flooding, things like that, we can get them the HOA to start moving if there's a situation where they're not moving fast enough.
Right.
Sometimes we can get the insurance claim piece figured out for them. It's always case by case, but those are the best ones where the big sigh of relief. Okay, I know what I need to do next, and I don't need you anymore for this.
I
Those are the
one of my and I imagine this is for you too. One of my favorite parts of what I get to do is when I walk into a family's living room and the kids are there and mom's there, and maybe there's been a series of things happening, which has prompted why they've called us, and I'm sitting at the kitchen table. And when the kids are tense and they're overwhelmed and maybe they're frustrated, mom's been in the hospital 2 or 3 times. All of a sudden, when their shoulders drop and they go, oh, it's like relief showed up, right? They feel rescue, they feel relief. That is always one of the best parts of what I get to do. And I'm guessing when you get some resolution to some of these issues, these people go, Anjali, thank you, thank you. That is really gratifying for you.
I love that. At the end of the day, I really want to solve the problem. It's hard.
Leave people better than the way you found them.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a lot of fun for me, and I've learned a lot. You've brought awareness to issues that I think we don't think about, we don't take for granted. That's why I wanted to have you on, is to shine some light on this. These can be catastrophic. This can be a big one, and so as professionals and adult kids who are listening in here, hey, I think there's some things we've given people some tips to really be thoughtful about. Any last tips or any last things you want to share before we get out of here?
Update your mailing address so that if you
Be
move,
current.
yeah, if you're not checking your mail regularly, um, update the HOA with your address of the place. Somebody has to be checking the mail, and you need to be monitoring it. So
All right. All right. Well, adult kids, one more level of oversight for your loved one that may or may not be on top of this, or make sure that they stay on top of it if they are already. So, Anjali, thank you for your time this morning. I'm really grateful for it, and thanks for investing in the podcast and sharing everything that you did today. And I just wish you the best here as we start off 2026.
of course, anytime. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode. Come back where we're going to meet a lot of interesting people to talk about lots of aspects of things that can be happening in the lives of our loved ones. So with that, I'm going to say get out of here. We'll take care. See you next time.